Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Saima Ijaz, joining you from Nanaimo, British Columbia, located on the beautiful and traditional territory of Nanaimo First Nations. Today, we have a very small group of interesting participants who are, at least the attendees are, family members, but also service providers and healthcare professionals associated with autism, and along with a very good, gifted high achiever who is on the spectrum. Just to inform you that the session is being recorded for other families. Saad is moderating the meeting, and you can send your questions to him anytime. We'll cover those by the end. My involvement in the field of autism is since I was unable to find the right teaching and socially apt places for my son with severe autism, who's 26 now. Working with him and others on the spectrum, I always found that their overall attentiveness, learning, mood, and confidence flourishes when they have understanding and supportive connections, both in and out of the family circles. So building social communication skills and providing opportunities for meeting similar peers in a relaxed, activity-based environment has been a setup that I have always encouraged and worked for. Most of my work as a behavior consultant has been for the families of pre and primary school age children with autism. This is the first year, however, when I have worked exclusively with adults on the spectrum, ranging from totally dependent with minimal gestural communication to verbally fluent high achievers who are holding important jobs. I have also spent a considerable amount of time researching and studying how the difficulties in forming social connections affect the emotional well-being of the adults on the spectrum, regardless of their severity. So this is an overview of the topics that I will be covering. Some common social communication difficulties faced by the folks with autism and their early adulthood stressors. Changing the mindset to lessen anxieties, strategies to restore old and making new friends. I'll go over certain factors that shape up the individual journey everyone on the spectrum has growing up, looking at how to connect with the ones with moderate to severe disabilities, bursting a few common myths about social difficulties faced by the adults on the spectrum, and my recent learning about the high achievers. It's a well-known fact that social connections give one a sense of meaning, purpose, and belonging, and have positive effects on our mental and physical health as they make us feel cared and valued. These connections are equally important whether we are on the spectrum or not. So social communication difficulties is one of the core diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorder, and some of the ways it shows is an odd interaction approach, difficulty initiating and holding conversations, and missing the nonverbal cues. Each one of the difficulties that they face has a reason that requires understanding and ways of getting around. It's a fact that autism folks, when communicating in their own group, do not find the communication breakdown that they find when communicating with the typical folks, which indicates that their way of communication is different than ours, not broken or flawed. We must also remember that majority of adults on the spectrum have a prolonged history of feeling socially misfit and have experienced social inadequacies along with extensive teasing during the school years, which contributes to their social anxiety. Now let's look at the early adulthood stressors for them. When the school ends, they lose companionship of classmates, teachers, and the structure it offers. Moving away from the home to another setup, sharing residence with unfamiliar people is a huge transition and a stressor. Difficulties in meeting new people and establishing friendships like peers has always been a challenge for the folks on the spectrum, but noticing how others are building and holding on relationships heightens their inability to do the same. Unable to find work or difficulty adjusting to the work routine adds to the stress and may result in quitting or losing the job, which leads to isolation, loneliness, and depression. Medical help in form of counseling and medication lessens the symptoms, but mostly fails to eliminate the underlying social anxiety. We live in a society that often rewards sameness and punishes differences. Sometimes it's obvious, like bullying, teasing, and overt exclusion. And in others, it's more subtle, like ignoring, making little hurting comments, or gossiping. These little and big moments of social judgment add up over the years and can create anxiety. And even the thought of putting yourself back into a situation where that might happen again. You have to tell yourself that those incidents weren't your fault, and they don't mean that you are not capable of making friends. They are indications of other people's insecurities and ignorance. Accepting being different and forgiving others for not knowing any better is a way to feel compassion towards yourself for what happened. Carrying anger and resentment shows in your personality, and so does when you genuinely accept yourself. People like being around those who like themselves, even if they're different. Now let's talk about connections. Have you lost touch with some special school-age friends? Social media has made it easier to search by name and location. Make a list of your old friends from school or social groups and try to reconnect. Use a fond memory of what you had fun doing together as a conversation starter and suggest to meet for coffee if nearby or online for gaming otherwise. An online friendship can be just as meaningful as the ones we have in more traditional setting. Online connection is less intimidating for meeting old and new people and has become more prevalent since COVID. Some of the advantages are that here we can control the amount of interaction we have with others. So conversations can be less awkward. This way, we can avoid the general anxiety of meeting in person and the sensory issues that come with unfamiliar places. There are many user-friendly free options like FaceTime, Messenger, WhatsApp, including the Zoom platform. Almost everyone has a Facebook account. You can make an exclusive group on Facebook, separate from the other contacts, and use that for gaming, online streaming, chatting, and much more. Seeking out people who share your interests will make it easier to bond. When you share similar passions, conversation become easier, and you'll have activities to participate in together. Do you like to paint, or are you a chess player? Do you love to dance or hike? There are many groups and clubs that you can find that are specific to one of your interests. Some of the best friendships you form in life are with people who can empathize with the difficulties you face in life because they have been through similar situations. There are social chat groups for people with moderate to high functioning autism, neurodivergent folks, or with other diverse abilities. The one can join, and they would be more likely to have experienced feeling different growing up. So these are the two examples of what we have in BC. I didn't search too much. I'm sure there are way more than this. We know that no two folks with autism or their individual circumstances are the same. Some of the important considerations that play a huge role in the growth and in shaping them into the person they are as adults are the extent of their sensory changes, access to the supports and therapies, extent of the intellectual abilities or disabilities, concurrent diagnosis, and social supports. I'll share a bit more on how these factors carve out different paths for everyone on the spectrum. The severity of sensitivities results in overwhelming sensory overload and the fight-flight responses in the child. severe auditory processing disorder, where the child can hear but not understand the meaning of the words and instructions, resulting in huge communication delays. These changes alert the families to seek out professional help to get a diagnosis. And early diagnosis gets one access to early interventions for building language and developing communication and play skills. Those with less pronounced sensory changes get diagnosed later during school years, with a small peak around preteen and teen years. They usually join social group activities, which provide support on building conversational skills and problem solving in a structured setup. Ones with even milder sensory challenges reach out for self-assessment as adults, while still others self-diagnose themselves as they continue to explore the reasons behind their social differences, sensory challenges, and high social anxiety. There are no supports available for the adults, though, and as by then they are considered much high functioning to require any support. The medical system once considered autism and intellectual disability as one and the same. In 1990, term mental retardation was used for over 70% of people with a diagnosis of autism. By 2014, the figure for a dual diagnosis with mental retardation, now called intellectual disability, had declined to 30%, as researchers had sharpened the diagnostic criteria for autism. For now, here in British Columbia, people with moderate to profound intellectual disabilities qualify for assisted living as adults. More able adults with autism usually share a suite with family, fellow students, or coworkers, or a significant other. And then there are those who live independently with very little supervision. And the ones who are living independently are actually at the highest risk of isolation. 70% of children and teens with autism have another diagnosis, with ADHD and generalized anxiety on top of the list. Other common ones are mood disorders, oppositional defiant disorder, and obsessive compulsive disorder. Folks on the spectrum are more prone to reflux, allergies, and autoimmune disorders. Children born with other disabilities like Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, or deaf blindness can also get diagnosed with autism later. Some children and teens get anxiety or mood disorder as their primary diagnosis, which is refractory to treatment and gets more complicated and layered with time, adding on to the list of psychiatric labels, and then he or she gets the diagnosis of autism years later. Treatments and therapies for each of them are different and based on their primary, secondary, and tertiary diagnosis and the available resources. A very important individualizing factor is each person's life in their support system, which begins with their family. Knowledgeable families provide the best support, from raising high concerns for the diagnosis to the selection of the professionals and therapies. Advocacy through school years as our systems are far from perfect to navigating the adult services and transitions. Parents and sometimes grandparents tend to be the earlier companions, which in some cases gradually shifts to a special aunt, uncle, sibling, or support workers. It's of paramount importance to make individuals with autism feel capable of meeting others, so they don't end up alone when family is not around to assist them. So a common myth about autistic people who can verbalize but stay completely quiet in the presence of others is that they don't want to make friends. Truth is that they have a condition called selective or situational mutism, where they only talk around people deemed safe. It's like when someone's terrified of making a mistake, so they freeze. Similarly, when you are so worried about saying the wrong thing, you avoid that by not saying anything at all. When they cannot verbalize what they want to, it's very distressing. Being understanding and accepting other forms of communication can be incredibly helpful. They should be encouraged to use an alternative communication approach like a speech app or texting or sign language. It's important to realize that it's extremely difficult for folks with selective mutism to form friendship by conversing, and they may require a more activity-based approach, like sharing hobbies, such as online gaming, chess, other supports, cooking, baking, anything they like to do with someone with them. Such together activities teach us sharing time, togetherness, cooperation, working as a team, getting to know each other better, and working through disagreements. Once folk with selective mutism have made a good connection, they will be able to verbalize. It's important to value the time they are verbal and respect the time when they're not, and not think of this as something that they are controlling or choosing to do. Another myth, as adults on the spectrum do not care about, as adults on the spectrum have hesitation initiating and maintaining conversations, they are considered to be either intellectually deficient or not care enough to change. Truth is that many folks have an average and some above average IQ and have spent countless hours of practice to overcome their social communication difficulties. But remembering anything is hard when you are in a highly anxious state of mind, which happens quite frequently for these folks. Almost everyone I met recently indicated how hard it is for them to have conversations. Think of conversation as turn-taking, which you have practiced enough times playing board games. It might be helpful to jot down some of the journal stuff that you can casually share about and ask the other person. For instance, you can share about a place where you went to eat or a recent movie that you watched and say what you liked about it. And then ask when did you go out to watch a movie last time? Or do you like a thriller or action-based or humor? Who's your favorite actor? Just practice it before actually saying it to the next person. It'll make it a little bit easier. This is how typical folks converse and find common interests and reasons to hang out. A common social cue is glancing at a person with a slight smile and a nod without saying anything, as acknowledging those who are that you routinely encounter. Another myth, autistic people are rude and frequently interrupt conversations as they don't care what the other has to say. While the truth is that they often interrupt to show that they are listening and have something relevant to add. They also interrupt as they have fleeting ideas and thoughts and forget what they were going to say if they don't share it right away. Practice taking long breaths when you feel like interrupting to bring your focus back to listening. However, if the person continues to go on and on without giving you a chance to share your input, you might want to use some facial expressions of looking bored, pretend to check time, just plain interrupt or excuse yourself. As I've observed that adults on the spectrum can develop an overly compromising interaction style to make friends, and for that reason can keep listening endlessly as well. Now let's talk about maintaining conversations. It depends on your listening attention. Ask yourself, why is it so hard to do that? Is it your auditory attention span that's very short in general? Or maybe it's just for new places. Is it something happens when you're meeting someone for the first time? Does it differ from person to person? Is it their pitch or pace of talking, or is it more topic-based? Is it about the choice of words and the amount of information they share? Do you have trouble understanding complex or long sentences? Have you been formally assessed for gaps in your receptive language? There are a number of language comprehension apps that can be used to build increasing level of comprehension. A speech language path or a behavior consultant can help you with this. You can also work with the background noise by using cancellation devices, filters, or build tolerance with gradual practice. Paraphrasing and asking questions is the usual way of letting the speakers know that you have been listening, which is the natural next step that comes once you have good listening attention and understand what's being shared. So myth that autistic people don't usually listen to what's being said as they don't give you the proper eye contact. Truth is that they can process what someone is saying much better when not looking at the person talking. They are very aware how much importance is given to the proper eye contact in our North American culture. Some have been mercilessly coached and coaxed for that in their early years. As consistent eye contact takes away their auditory focus, some find it helpful to look at the lips. It looks better than looking away and improves comprehension with some lip reading skills. For others, my advice has been to just look at the bridge of the nose, middle of the eyes. It works pretty well. Amount of eye contact given also depends upon the intensity of other sensory inputs that the person might be experiencing, like brightness of the room, how loud are the background sounds, and how anxious or tired the person is. Another myth, all nonverbal autistics have intellectual disability and do not understand what's being said. Truth is that this is not the case for all. Be very aware of what you say, as they may have perfect understanding of the spoken language. Some nonverbal autism folks have written blogs and books mentioning that they were considered non-competent and about the stuff that was said in their presence, thinking that they wouldn't know what it means. There are some competent folks with autism who have high sensory sensitivities and high auditory processing defects that do not understand spoken language, and the script works better for them. Both verbal and nonverbal adults with autism may have concurrent intellectual disability, from borderline low to profound. The percentage and severity of the intellectual disability is, however, more pronounced in the minimally communicative nonverbals. Folks with moderate to profound intellectual disabilities qualify for assisted living options in BC. The assistance is usually geared towards managing the daily task, and attention is not always paid to connecting well with the individual they're helping out or helping them build other social connections. Opportunities can be created for bringing similar folks together in a structured setup on a weekly basis with assisted interaction and sharing space with simple activities that can help develop sharing and cooperation skills. I once organized a social group of nonverbal autistic teenagers with varying range of intellectual levels who were asked to bring along just one of their favorite toys, devices, books, etc. And time was structured for an indoor and an outdoor activity, an outing, and then coming back to share a meal. We were all surprised at how relaxed they were in each other's company, how well they got along, and how they looked forward to that gathering week after week. Different fun and free events have regularly been arranged by various autism and other disability societies and organizations across British Columbia and can be accessed from anywhere around the world. This happened around COVID time. These events are more geared towards teens and adults with intellectual disabilities, but they're worth exploration by all. And the schedules can be seen on each of the organization's website, like Best Buddies Canada, Cool Arts, Co-Make Do, live stream events, events by Disability Foundation and by Cerebral Palsy Association, or collectively on Family Support Institute's website events page as Calendar of Connection. One of the hardest tasks that I have been involved with as a mother and as a consultant has been explaining some caregivers how to connect and gain trust of nonverbal autistic children and adults with moderate to severe intellectual disabilities. This consists of looking at and understanding important aspects of expressions that the person can show. What are the different ways that he or she uses to express for communication? The important devices or tools he or she would need and access to for communication, and what are his or her overall comfort zone for building connections. So working with my son initially, and then with other 3 to 5 years old with nonverbal autism and huge challenging behaviors, I found that when they had reached a calm state of mind, each one of them could initiate requests, indicate wants, show feelings, indicate disagreement and signs of compromise, and give attention, whether it was by vocalization or by eye gaze or the use of facial expressions and body language. What was needed then was a way of keeping them calm and then connecting their thoughts and feelings and gestures to language as we know it. There are multiple ways of expressions, speech being just one. Others are use of pictures, labels, pecs, words, or sentence strips, visual boards, sign language, talking apps, writing, typing. And our job is to find the one that would work best for each while working and encouraging body language, facial expressions, and gestures until the child or person starts learning another form of expression. I will share how my son would initiate an interaction, especially when a person he's not totally comfortable with yet. So Qasim can verbalize only a few words at a time. And these words are not always clear. But if he notices a blank look on the face of the person he's trying to communicate with and knows that he didn't say it right, he becomes nervous and he'll repeat the words faster and faster, making it sound more non-coherent with each attempt. And what works for him at that point is that if you just hold your hand and take a deep breath and then hand him a device to type or a piece of paper to write on. So he wouldn't on his own initiate the second step. He would just be so focused or anxious about getting it right. A basic requirement for building connections is knowing how and when to speak and when to use another way of expression for each person with high auditory processing defects and high sound sensitivities, from greetings to sharing information. So what's a comfortable distance that you stand while talking? What's the pace of talking, pitch and volume, amount of language, complexity of language, expressions and tones? It could be very specific for everyone, and it sounds very confusing. But if you're still learning and the person has high sensory issues, just go slow and low and follow his cues. A lot depends upon if the care provider would offer choices as a way of showing value to this opinion, explain what his day would be like, provide information and directions using a medium that's understandable by the person. Not communicating about the happenings of the day, especially if there's a change in the routine, or communicating in a way that's less comprehensible to the person would directly affect his sense of orientation, level of comfort, and mood. Recently, I had the privilege of meeting and working with a few high achievers, 2 late diagnoses and a few self-diagnosed folks this year with previous diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder, history of panic attacks, and depression. Some felt relieved as they had found the reason why they had felt social difficulties all their lives. Others not so much, as it raised a lot many questions and uncertainties for them. They were well versed about autism but confused about their next step. And that's where I've been contacted. So I found these individuals to be well educated, they're verbally fluent, were holding jobs, proficient work related communication, live independently or in shared setups. But despite their numerous achievements, I found them with low self esteem, overworked, taken advantage by others, passive communication style, which in some cases showed hints of build up anger, resentment, and defeated attitude. They're basically overthinkers who place a lot of pressure on themselves. They recall having communication difficulties growing up and no special friends. A few described feeling dissociation when overwhelmed and no memory of certain events when in crowded or loud places. Spending time with them, I found each one of them to be a wonderful, caring human being, given their 100% and more to whatever they do. And they experience social anxiety because they are afraid. They think they can't make good friends. Not sure how to initiate short talk or uh, figure out what the social cues are about. And they crave for friendships. One of the first steps that I emphasize is about valuing yourself as a person before expecting it from others. Feel proud of your contributions at work and your role in family, community, and how you have coped for years under challenging issues. They're afraid of conflict, so compromise and give in easily. So I ask them to make sure that they're not over compromising. The value of no to be able to set healthy social and workplace boundaries. They can only take so much work. And I ask them not to get overloaded by those looking to take advantage of your people pleasing nature. Take care of your emotional well being always by taking time for yourself. And like I said before, accept being different and forgive others for not knowing you better. When you genuinely accept yourself, it shows, and people like being around those who like themselves and are confident. Then you can educate them about your difficulties and the spectrum later if you choose to. Those who show no interest are not worth investing your time in. Do not invest overly in those who don't seem to be making much of an effort for you. Acceptance from family is required. It doesn't mean resignation to the diagnosis because I've seen that so many times. It's understanding that something is what it is and there's a way through it. As this person has amazing strengths based on who he or she is, and knowledge and understanding of that will help you support him or her better. As a family member, help them build confidence by directly asking their opinion on subjects. Give them space within the conversation to offer their view and allow them the time to properly express themselves. Using a helpful device for communication is okay. You're not encouraging the person to stop conversing verbally. You're just making it easier for them and making them feel confident in situations where they might need a little bit of extra help or support to communicate. Keep conversations positive, short, and solution oriented. So, how can the coworker support? Again, by acceptance and understanding, and by making allowance for their difficulties and inputs. Ask what type of sensory accommodations would be helpful. A quiet place, low lights, background sounds, light music. Make sure that your direction and instructions are straightforward as they can't read between the lines. Important to give them space within the conversation to offer their views and allow them the time to properly express themselves. Do not dismiss their ideas. They're working hard to build their confidence. If an idea won't work, still point out the value of that and highlight the positive aspects of it. and use written instructions and use schedules wherever possible. At present, we have 2.2% of the adult population with a diagnosis of autism and an unknown percentage of undiagnosed and self-diagnosed folks. There are zero supports for the high-functioning adults and next to none for the moderate functioning. Least we can do at an individual level is to show understanding and acceptance of their challenges and be inclusive of the few we know within our circle who have difficulties connecting, regardless of the diagnosis. You would be surprised by the value of their friendship. Some other ideas could be about creating a sensory sensitive meetup place or assigning a couple of hours of dim lights and low music at the offices, coffee pauses, creating meet and greet opportunities at care homes and apartment buildings and neighborhoods in general. So thank you for joining us today. You can find the link of today's recording on Autism Solutions website education page in a couple of days, and can also view the topics lined up for the next year. If you have any questions about this or any other webinar, please drop me an email. So first, let's check if you have any questions, Saad. I got some through an email that I forwarded to you as well. And then we'll open the floor for more questions.
Yeah, so first up, we have one saying, I'm assisting my 22-year-old niece with autism who mostly stays at home. How can I help her make a few friends?
Well, if you are listening right now, I hope that you have a few ideas from the webinar. I have some, to get a specific answer, it would depend on knowing a little bit more about your niece. Like what is her intellectual abilities like? How does she communicate? What does she like to do? Is she good at playing board games or maybe video games? Would you like to share a bit more about that? You could share it here on the forum, or you can send me an email later.
Our next question is, I hear that more late diagnoses are predominantly for women and girls. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, this is quite true. While male to female ratio for the diagnosed children is 4:1, more females are getting diagnosed in adulthood years. I recently was reading about this, that girls tend to have less repetitive behaviors. And instead of fight and flight responses to overwhelming sensory overloads, they have a freeze and fawn reaction. So, and they show less hyperactivity. So this is like a girl who is just sitting with a couple of things, doesn't want to socialize, but is not doing something that's really jumping out at you. They also better visual observers and learn to imitate social behaviors earlier and better than guys. And then there are some mothers who get a child. They had a tough time growing up, didn't have many of the social connections going for them. And then they get a child who gets a diagnosis of autism. And as they're learning about it, it sort of clicks to them that, maybe I have that too. And then they get themselves assessed. So those are few ways that it's happening.
Next question is, how can I make a page for my friends on Facebook that you mentioned?
Well, I've made a couple of times. It's been a while, but I think when you open your Facebook page, just underneath your name, you'll see a tab for a group or a page. And you can click on that, and it'll just ask you to make a new page or make a new group. And you just follow the instructions that are coming your way. And yeah, it's really simple. You get to choose whether it's going to be an open or a closed group, or if you want to have just for a few friends, then it's better to have a closed group, I guess, because so no one can see what you are posting in there and talking about. You want to add anything to that, any of you? Because I think you might
I
know
can
a bit more.
can add
Yeah.
on a little bit to it. Facebook pages, they're pretty good for organizing like social events for like hanging out and gatherings. Um, if you're looking for more of just a chat group setting, then just creating a group chat within Facebook Messenger I found works really well. And then you can share stuff with each other easily that way. Um, it requires a little less know-how about Facebook than making a Facebook page, so it's easier to get into if you just want to start with that and then move on to the Facebook page afterwards.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, Another question asks, I have a high functioning daughter who lives independently in a building with people of different health needs. I've assisted her, until now, but would like her to try making friends on her own. What advice would you have for her?
Well, from your description, she seems quite competent and also fortunate that she has you supporting her into her 30s now. Uh, I can forward you the link of this webinar's recording if you want to share with her so she can get a few ideas. It would be pretty much like what she would like to decide on her own at this point, which seems like a better option to her. One thing could be that the building that she's living in, talking to the manager uh, for the common room time where folks can come in for the meet and greet, quiet time where they can have an activity, just bring their coffee, something like on those lines. And also, if she is working, then and if she's okay with it, then talking to her manager, if she can, they can think of something that the colleagues can do once or twice a week. Yeah, but if he would like to reach out to me, she's most welcome. Anything
And the
else?
last of our email questions is, I have a 10-year-old son with autism who is a bit of a loner and has no friends at school. What can I do to get the staff to assist him?
Okay, when you're doing the IP skills, get the teacher, if you have a resource teacher or an inclusion teacher on board with that, you can talk about it, what seems like a good idea of making part of it, becoming a part of a buddy system, sharing activities. If he has an EA, then she can help him with reaching some of the goals. Also, if he is in a home therapy or has a consultant, you can, school sometimes are good at taking instructions from the consultant. So that could be another way that, get her or him to talk to the principal or the teacher. I've received a question as well. It's about the PowerPoint sharing, and yeah, I can definitely. I'm okay by sharing a copy with you. So I'll email you.